Chairman Hoven, Vice Chairman Udall, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today and for your willingness to conduct an oversight hearing on the President's budget request for fiscal year 2019. My name is Robert McGhee, Vice Chairman of the Poarch Band of Creek Indians, and I'm here today in my capacity as the Vice President of the United South and Eastern Tribes Sovereignty Protection Fund. As was acknowledged by the 100th Congress, the United States owes an historical debt to tribal nations. This debt includes many injustices that Native people have suffered as a result of federal policy, including federal actions that sought to terminate tribal nations and assimilate Native people. It also involves the ceding of our land holdings and natural resources, oftentimes by force to the United States, resulting in perpetual trust obligation to tribal nations. These resources are the very foundation of this nation and have allowed the United States to become the wealthiest and the strongest world power in history. Federal appropriations to Indian country are simply a repayment on this debt. This is not merely a question about addressing poverty or needs. Our relationship is more than this. This is ultimately a question about honor, about fulfilling commitments and promises. A great nation keeps its word. America must fulfill its promise to us in not just words, but action. While this administration claims to prioritize Indian country, this budget request reveals otherwise. It proposes deep cuts to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, eliminates and makes changes to the Indian Health Service programs without consultation, and a host of other eliminations and cuts, both directly and indirectly, impacting Indian country. Like Senator Udall mentioned, we are being told that this request is just a messaging document, and that if Indian country does not agree with its proposals, we should look to Congress to ensure the trust responsibility is delivered upon. While we understand that only Congress has the power to appropriate funds, the administration is sending a powerfully negative message to Indian country. In reducing, eliminating, and calling into question the constitutionality of federal Indian programs, this administration is ignoring and undermining its trust responsibility to tribal nations. This is unacceptable. Because of our history and our unique relationship with the United States, the trust obligation of the federal government to Native peoples, as reflected in the federal budget, is fundamentally different from ordinary discretionary spending and should be considered mandatory in nature. Recently, some in Congress have called for mandatory funding for IHS. We strongly support this proposal, which is more consistent with the federal trust obligation, and urge that this be expanded to include all federal Indian programs. Continued underfunding results in tribal nations having to subsidize greater and greater levels of the trust obligation, a violation of our sacred agreement that has persisted regardless of administration. We urge this committee and congressional appropriators, as they have previously, to reject the deep cuts found in this President's request and to work fully to fund the trust obligation. Now I'd like to turn to just some of the specific comments we have on the President's budget request. Regarding proposals for infrastructure package, it is critical that tribal nations have direct access to funding available via any infrastructure package. While we acknowledge that the President's infrastructure plan does state that some funding will be set aside for tribal nations, additional details remain unclear. The President's plan also proposes to streamline infrastructure permitting. We are concerned that without strong tribal consultation and cultural review requirements, these proposals could serve to undermine tribal sovereignty and the protection of cultural resources and public health. The request also allocates funding from the BIA budget for the reorganization of the Department of the Interior. The Secretary has yet to significantly consult with or provide much detail to tribal nations on the reorganization of the department, although we are aware of meetings held with federal employees and other units of government, as well as draft regional plans. The request for Indian Affairs is 15.6% decrease from the fiscal year 2018 CR and a 20% decrease from the omnibus. Nearly every line item in the BIA budget would see reductions. However, the Interior's budget justification describes the request in the following way. The 2019 budget supports the administration's commitment to help promote tribal nation building and self-determination, empower tribal communities, foster tribal self-sufficiency, create educational and economic opportunities, ensure safe Indian communities, preserve and foster cultural heritage, and steward natural resources. From our perspective, it is difficult to see how any of this could be true considering the deep reductions and eliminations found in the request. The fiscal year 2019 budget request for IHS is 8% above the 2018 CR, but a slight decrease from the omnibus. We strongly support the increases to the chronically underfunded agency. Despite these increases, we and others in Indian country are strongly opposed to the elimination of the Community Health Representatives Program, as well as other eliminations and decreases found in the request. Finally, the request also proposes to move special diabetes programs from mandatory to discretionary spending. In closing, while we take a firm position that all members of Congress have an obligation to tribal nations, The members of this committee have a greater role in understanding and working towards fulfillment of this obligation. As leaders who have consistently demonstrated a true understanding of this commitment, we implore this committee to lead the change within Congress that is necessary to improve how the United States views, honors, and fulfills its promises to any country. The federal budget is a reflection of this commitment. We recognize that there are many causes and issues that this body considers. However, we ask that you always remember to seek and deliver upon this nation's first promise to its first people, the trust obligation. Thank you.